Bosnia was formerly part of a country known as Yugoslavia. It had a president up until 1980 known as Josip Broz, and famously known across the Balkans as Tito. He died and had a succession plan in place, nor a successor. This meant that people that had nationalist rhetoric, such as Slobodan Milosevic, who was a Serbian leader at the time, would promote speeches towards the end of the 1980s, and as such, countries decided to vote for their own referendums and independence. Croatia and Slovenia did this in 91, and Bosnia followed in 92, unanimously voting for an independent country. Not long after the referendum, Bosnia disintegrated into a war of aggression. It was overrun. People were forcibly displaced, put in concentration camps. The longest siege in modern warfare was taking place in Sarajevo, and ultimately the genocide in Srebrenica would take place in 1995, killing over 8,000 men and boys. Prior to the wars in Bosnia, there were three main ethno-nationalist groups. The first were Bosnian Muslims, also known as Bosniaks, and followed by that were Bosnian Serbs, who are mainly of an Orthodox faith, followed by Bosnian Croats, who are more predominantly of a Catholic faith. With the war, it meant that people that had once lived harmoniously, that had celebrated each other's religious festivals and such, had quickly become enemies and had become divided and were targeting one another simply because of their faith. People that were working together in factories had started separating into their own little groups. In schools, children had stopped playing with one another, and very quickly people picked up signs that would be infamous with the war in Bosnia, such as the three-finger symbol, which associated people with the idea of a greater Serbia. So in order to create a greater Serbia, it meant that land needed to be acquired, and it also meant that something that was later coined as ethnic cleansing would take place, where you get rid of a whole group of people based on an identity. In this case, it was because people were either Bosnian Muslims or Bosnian Catholics, depending on what part of Bosnia you're from. This meant that either soldiers came one by one and forcibly forced people to leave their homes. Women and children were allowed to go to free territories, whereas boys and men, arguably over the age of 12, were often held, and sometimes, depending where you lived, were put into concentration camps. Humanitarian aid was being sent from across the world. The issues were that it wasn't being allowed to pass checkpoints that had been put up by either Bosnian Serbs or Bosnian Croats. More often than not, if the aid was being flown in, if there was any form of shots or gunfire, the plane had to turn around. So that it wouldn't reach those that it required it the most.